get up. And on the way up, we're going to bite a kneecap off, all right? And we're going to stand up, and then it's going to take 2 more shots to knock us down, all right? And on the way up, we're going to take your other kneecap, and we're going to get up, and then it's going to take 3 shots to get us down.
Well, hi there, Kneecaps Nation. Good to have you back for another edition of Kneecaps for Breakfast. Vince Progar, that's me. Happy to be joined, as always, by my longtime partner in crime, Phil Byrne. And Phil, we're firmly entrenched in NFL preseason. Why? Because we just had the Hall of Fame game take place a few nights ago, and it turned into be an instant classic. So if that's not a harbinger of things to come for NFL 2026, I don't know what is.
Yeah, because I watched more than 5 minutes of it.
Yeah,
I was like, oh, it was an instant classic? Oh, news to me.
Well, and I had zero intention of really settling in to watch it, and I turned it on in the third quarter for more or less background noise while I kind of winded down for the night. And then when I saw that it's getting down to the nitty-gritty and both the Panthers and the Cardinals are starting to trade touchdowns, and Tirico and Collinsworth are starting to call it like it's a Week 9 Sunday Night Football matchup, all of a sudden the iPad goes on the lap and the eyes start to point towards the TV and, okay, go on. And it's like there's things you remember from watching college football the way you and I do. And I remember, hey, Haynes King, isn't that the kid from Georgia Tech who kind of brought them back from the dead the last couple of years? And
now here's a guy that played at Georgia Tech. I'm going to have to check my notes here because
check notes.
Didn't expect. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And yeah, wound up being a pretty entertaining Hall of Fame game. But that's the beginning, middle, and end of the Hall of Fame game discussion that we're going to have. We're going to kind of get back to our own domain here and focus more on our hometown team here. And Phil, I don't think beating around the bush is the best idea. We kind of knew going in that something was going to happen with Jahmyr Gibbs this past week. You really couldn't expect him to do this hold in for much longer. We knew there was rumblings of something going to be happening with Bijan Robinson pretty soon the last time you and I talked, and that's really how it unfolded. Robinson got the deal first, and then within 72 hours or less, the deal got done between the Lions and Jahmyr Gibbs. 3-year contract. He's officially the highest paid running back in the history of the sport, $67.5 million contract extension. Averages about 22.5 a year, 51.5 guaranteed, 37.7 million the instant he put the ink to the paper. And I think he outdid the Bijan Robinson deal by about $750K. So he got his wish, he got his money, he got more money than anybody else to ever play the position, and he will be a Detroit Lion until he probably isn't doing this at a high level anymore.
Well, so a couple things, we knew that this is probably the next one to get done, or at least probably one of the most important ones to get done. You still have Jack Campbell. You still have Brian Branch out there, a couple of other guys in that draft class.
I thought Campbell got extended this
Campbell did. Campbell did.
Branch, no, but
no,
I think
I'm blanking on
with the injury.
I'm thinking of Laporta. Other Iowa guy.
Iowa guy,
So anyways, this happened really, really quick. You mentioned the Bijan Robinson deal getting done. I think within mere hours of that getting done, the Colts and Jonathan Taylor get theirs done. It wasn't quite the same amount of terms. So Bijan, was really the one I think that they wanted to model this after. And, it was interesting that they didn't have Gibbs go first and have Atlanta kind of play after. We sat back. So, I don't know if that's credit to Jahmyr Gibbs and his agent or the Lions just trying to honor him and make him feel, like what, $73 million or, whatever this deal is. We talked about the shelf life of running backs. I think get pretty ad nauseum, but he is the best running back we've had since Barry in this organization. I think if you were
dare you disrespect Kevin Smith like that?
Oh, I thought you were going to say Ron Rivers or oh shoot, who was R2 Spinner from Kentucky. Yeah,
James
Kevin Smith,
Stewart.
Kevin Jones. We could go through it. We just have a podcast where we just
Javid Best.
name names of Lions running backs of yesteryear.
Mikel Lashore.
On Johnson completely fell off the face of the earth.
He sure did.
But I think we as Lions fans sleep a little better at night, knowing that this has been taken care of. We have the holdout ended. We have everything that we can look forward to for the rest of the season. Obviously, we want him to stay healthy. We'll see what his contact throughout the preseason, throughout training camp will look like. But this is a better team with Jahmyr Gibbs in the fold, especially now that we don't have David Montgomery back there. I think Pacheco will be fine, but he is a clear number 2. There is no 1A, 1B anymore. This is Jahmyr Gibbs' show. So you better have to get him squared away and satisfied, and that's what they did.
And it ends the drama, too. And you never like to see drama around a locker room or a clubhouse. And you knew this was kind of a specter that was really looming over top of the 4 walls of Allen Park. So for that to finally be behind everybody, and we can finally start to move on to more important things at hand, and to get him back on the field, get him back to participating in the drills actively instead of just being a viewing participant from the sidelines in street clothes, so to speak. That's something that not only benefits him, but it benefits the entire operation. So I'm happy about that. It still irks me the way they went about it, because there was so much runway with his rookie deal. He was getting paid peanuts, and they had him under control for, I believe, 2 more seasons fully, and then they could have picked up that team option for the following year, and then they could have started getting into franchise tags and all this and using some of those tools that the franchise has as leverage, and to use that to their advantage. The problem is that they set a precedent long ago in the complete other direction, paying their guys way too early and getting into the habit of making these guys the highest paid at their position in the history of the sport. And because of that, then all of a sudden the leverage goes over to Camp Gibbs by saying, hey, you paid this guy early, you paid that guy early, you paid that guy early. What about me? What do I got to do? So the Lions really didn't have a leg to stand on, even though on paper they had all that runway of, hey, we don't need to throw all this money at him this quickly. Based on prior actions to other players, it seems like there really wasn't much of a choice.
No. I think we were kind of out of options by this point. Now, the interesting thing is we talked about some of the running backs that got paid. I think, these 3 were kind of jockeying. I think Jonathan Taylor is a little bit, underappreciated to some degree. I don't think most people consider him in the same class as Bijan and Jahmyr. I don't know who that next running back would be that would get a deal to potentially reset it. So we might be looking at Jahmyr Gibbs being the highest paid running back for a minute here, because I think if you got a couple of these running backs that have come out and have been drafted pretty high, they're going to be on the rookie deals for a while, and we'll kind of see how that goes after that.
I'm going to tell you what, though, and you can blame a few different things. You can blame a different offensive coordinator from a season ago. You can blame incoherence on the offensive line from a season ago. There's a lot of different ways that you can go to spread that blame around. But I think that we are all in agreement that Gibbs really needs to, now that he got his money, now that he got his way, he really needs to be the one to take that giant step forward, because I still don't believe, as much as we've seen from Gibbs since he's come into the league, I still don't think he's uncapped everything that he's able to do. I don't think that the motor is running at 100%. I still think there's another gear left in him that he needs to tap into and really show us what he can do. And last year, as I said, you can go up and down the list of excuses or reasons or whatever you want to refer to him as. The bottom line is, Phil, he just didn't get the job done last year. He was only on 3 occasions did he rush for over 100 yards. only 6 occasions all season long did he rush for 75 or more yards. And on only 3 occasions all year did he contribute 75 or more yards receiving out of the backfield. So, by and large, Phil, from a statistical standpoint, he just didn't do enough last year. And I don't think moving forward, now that he got all this money and is the highest paid at his position in the history of the sport, I don't think you can look back on what happened a season ago and label that acceptable moving forward. He, at some point, if you're as talented and as good of a running back and dynamic offensive playmaker as he is, at some point, you need to be able to overcome certain things like a new offensive system, which he's going to be participating in once again this year, the third offensive coordinator in 3 years. There is going to be some turnover and some new faces on this offensive line. I think on paper, it's a stronger, more solid unit than it was a season ago, but it's still going to be a little bit different. You can't be looking at these things if you're a guy like Jahmyr Gibbs and blame that for some less than optimal levels of production. And that's before we even start talking about injuries or anything like that. Bottom line, what I'm saying, Phil, is what we saw from him a season ago is not acceptable. And I don't think anything short of numbers right up there at the very top of every running back in this league. And if you're not in that top 3 to 5 statistically moving forward, then people are going to start looking and saying this was a colossal waste.
So for me, I think more than the stats, because I think there are a lot of intangibles at play for why last season went off course, which I don't know if we'll have full time to kind of diagnose and kind of remember what went wrong before the season or not. But where he needs to get better, and something that I think we either didn't utilize properly, having a true like 2 running back tandem when David Montgomery was here, or kind of what the situation was. But last season, I felt like a lot of the offensive issues was related around the fact of, yes, we didn't have Ben Johnson. We were not finishing drives. We had a lot of stalled out 3 and outs. We had a lot of drives that would end at midfield, short of Jake Bates being able to kick a field goal. And we obviously ended a lot of drives without scoring touchdowns. Where I would like to see Jahmyr Gibbs turn the corner now that he has gotten paid, more than a productive standpoint, is where is his effectiveness going to be in the red zone? I think we use David Montgomery as a little bit more of a power back than Jahmyr Gibbs. I'm not saying he's not capable of it, but it's kind of like that last evolution if he is a Pokemon. Like, what is he going to evolve into on that highest evolutionary chart? Can he actually take on a couple of runners and get those hard carries and hard yards? We know he's elusive. He's a threat in the receiving game. He is very, very dynamic. But I think for me, the thing that I would like to see from him that we haven't really seen yet, I don't think it's quite unlocked, is his effectiveness in the red zone. That's something that I'd love to see explore a little bit more under Drew Petzing.
I guess my last bit of those little nuggets I want to throw out is if you look at guys that have been RB1 on their team that wound up winning the Super Bowl, you're looking at the likes of Isaiah Pacheco, Cam Akers, Leonard Fournette, Damian Williams, Sony Michel, LeGarrette Blount, and C.J. Anderson. None of these guys are guys that would blow you away at any point of their careers necessarily. I think some guys maybe had more promise built into their onsets of their careers than others, but none of these guys were ever in the conversation at being top of their class at their positions. That just goes to show, just because you've got the biggest star running back or the highest paid running back doesn't necessarily translate to winning as much as one might think. So I guess just a
So
little cautionary tale on that front.
yeah, I will say though, I think K9 Kenneth Walker is really kind of an interesting study in kind of both directions, really, where I think he started to flash a lot of running back one potential when Charbonnet went down last year for the Seahawks. I know he didn't have the stats to, rival some of the top guys in the league. His effectiveness, I think, was there. I don't think the Seahawks win the Super Bowl without K9, but then they didn't resign him, right? So that's the other side of the coin. So Lions are kind of in a unique territory. I think they've obviously set the precedent, as you mentioned, Vince, about um, they want to reward the guys that they have drafted. They want to go ahead and use that core nucleus that has been in house, that knows the system, that has worked with Dan and Brad over the years. Jahmyr Gibbs is a part of that. But the formula, if we were to win the Super Bowl this year and have a running back like Gibbs, certainly seems like it's going in a different direction.
100%. But bottom line, Gibbs is here to stay. And once again, it's an example of the Lions favoring their guys, paying their guys, and we'll see who the next guy to receive a Brinks truck backing up to their place of residences in the coming year. Let's take a look at another important position on the field, Phil, and that is the backup quarterback position. So the Lions went in familiar territory by bringing Teddy Bridgewater back out of retirement, fresh off of coaching some high school football, and I believe he led his team to the state championship down in Florida, if I'm not mistaken. He had a pretty good run as a high school football coach during his first stint in retirement. The Lions convinced him to come back and be the backup quarterback for 2026. And just today, as we're recording this podcast, Phil, we caught some scuttlebutt that the backup quarterback, presumed Bridgewater, is going back into retirement. So, as they say, one old time familiar backup quarterback deserves another. Lions get rid of Teddy Bridgewater and they bring in Josh Dobbs for a 1 year contract extension. And it's noteworthy because the only other quarterback on the roster besides Jared Goff was the undrafted rookie out of Illinois, Luke Altmaier, who I think you kind of want to have a little bit more NFL live snap experience between Jared Goff and what's behind curtain number two. So out goes Bridgewater, in comes Josh Dobbs, it looks like, as QB2 heading into this year.
I think the trade-off, there's not much of a trade-off, to be honest. I think Teddy Bridgewater was proven in the league. He was proven with Dan when he was back with the Saints. They had that history built up. But I think there is a noted difference between the backup that we had last year, Kyle Allen, who then signed with his last name brethren, Josh Allen, with the Bills, who he was with previously. So they returned out there, and Teddy Bridgewater. So I'll say this, very, very strange timing. You mentioned the connection with high school football. You got to think his high school that he coached last year is in knee deep in two-a-days and getting ready for the season. With school approaching. But with Gibbs, or not Gibbs, with Josh Dobbs, name's a little familiar there. Dobbs, so he did spend a little bit of a cup of coffee with the Lions at one point, but I think this is going to be just familiarity with Drew Petzing and knowing this offense, and
Bingo.
you just gotta hope he doesn't come on the field. He has more recent game action than Teddy Bridgewater, I think, of note. That one stretch that he had with the Vikings, even though they were kind of playing quarterback roulette, he did get a handful of starts in there. So,
And he also, as you pointed out, Phil, has familiarity with Drew Petzing
yeah,
from a little bit of time down in Arizona where he did get on the field spelling Kyler Murray on a few occasions.
yeah, yeah. And he's one of these guys. Whenever he does play, they always brag that he's got the um, astronomer
He's a
background
rocket
or
science.
rocket science, so he's smart. He's going to be good with Goff in there, and hey, whatever works in the quarterback room, and you make those guys healthy. so be it. But I would assume we're probably going to be seeing a lot of Luke Altmaier here in this preseason game this upcoming week.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And I think we tend to overanalyze the backup quarterback position a little bit too much because I think if you broaden the lens out a little bit, Phil, if we see either any combination of Josh Dobbs or Luke Altmaier in a live game situation in the regular season, that means the season is essentially on life support if it's for any prolonged amount of time. Next up, Phil, is the preseason game between the Lions and the Cincinnati Bengals coming up this Thursday night at 7 o'clock down in Cincinnati. So this is really difficult to do, increasingly so as we start to move into this new age of the NFL, Phil. It's just so hard to do any type of real game preview for a preseason game because I don't think we're going to see anybody that anybody knows or gives a hoot about. So, what are some of your goals that you have in the back of your mind as we head into preseason game number one? What are a few bullet points that you're looking to take away from Thursday night?
Well, two of the names on defense, and that's primarily where the focus for me is going to be. I don't think we're going to learn much about this Lions offense based on the personnel that we're even going to have in there. I say, if anything, with that offense that we need to pay attention to, who exactly is playing on the offensive line? I know there's been some injuries, some guys in and out of the lineup. That's one story. For me, though, we're going to go to two names I want to go ahead and focus on. I think, provided they don't get hurt in practice or something like that, are probably going to get a lot of playing time. And that is going to be Ahmed Hassanein and also Nick Whiteside, the cornerback. A lot of people have been talking about he has been having a standout camp. I don't think this is a guy that I would say necessarily is in line in the race to be a starting cornerback. But we have a lot of issues back there, and if there is some guy that is starting to impress, I at least say that is healthy for depth. You got some guys that are trying to make the team. Those are the kind of guys that you tend to have a better season with if they are standing out in camp. They have a good preseason, and maybe they're not like a scratch for your game, but like they're the last cornerback that you've got that you're going to dress each game. That's the kind of stuff that you want to see. Ahmed Hassanein, like I don't think he's going to be a starter. I'm not even sure if he will be in the two deep, but he was kind of an intriguing player, and then he got hurt last year before we could really even see much of him. But we've talked about the secondary and we've talked about the other defensive end spot. Opportunity is there for these guys to at least log some playing time and actually put some stuff on tape.
What do you expect to see from the offense? Do you think there's going to be anything that we learn about this new system, even though the personnel isn't going to look like what we're going to be used to? Do you expect to learn anything from this offense, or is it going to be kind of similar to what we saw last year under John Morton, where we saw nothing until that regular season started, and then we were all kind of taken by surprise when the offense couldn't get anything going whatsoever?
I think we're more likely to see some guys play maybe a series or two. And again, I'm not talking Goff, I'm not talking Gibbs, I'm not talking St. Brown. In that week 2 game against the Commanders at home, I think for this one, honestly, like we're not getting Gibbs, we're not getting Pacheco. I think our starting running back is going to be, either like Sione Vaki or Sailors
I'm
back
so
there.
tired of hearing about Vaki.
You know,
Seriously, the guy's
I
been so
think
heavily talked of for ever since he got drafted, and the guy's never done a damn thing for us. But anyway,
well,
didn't mean to cut you off.
it's that whole draft class. You can't shake it. Christian Mahogany, who looked like he was the one standout from it. He comes to camp overweight.
Mm-hmm.
He's the one person that didn't pass the endurance test. So, um, anyways, I just think it's going to be a whole lot of nothing. Again, it wouldn't shock me if Luke Altmaier's your starting quarterback. Maybe you get Isaac Tesla in for a series or two. I don't think he plays much. Um, where's our tight end room at?
They brought in Anthony Ferkser. Wasn't he on the
Sure.
roster at some point last
That's
season, and they brought him back the other day?
Yeah, that sounds about the starting tight end. I don't think we're going to get much. It will be live football. as a Lions fan, I would still encourage you to go ahead and watch it, but keep your temperament down a little bit. Even if the guys like I mentioned with like Hassanein and Whiteside flashed a little bit, um, again, consider who the Bengals are actually playing to, right? So, I it's the problem with
You're
preseason
not going to
football.
see Burrow. I'm almost certain.
No,
I'd almost bet
yeah,
my house on it. You're not going to see Jahmyr Chase at all in this game. So
nope.
you're looking at a situation where it's like, what am I grading you on? My twos versus their twos. I mean, that's where this whole preseason thing in recent years is almost kind of like a little bit of a sham because you're not grading on the scale to where you're actually learning anything or being able to evaluate these guys properly because
It,
it's all going to be irrelevant because you're not going to be going up against these guys at any point in time during the regular season, you assume.
yeah, and quite frankly, in this first game too, I think you're even going to see guys that are in third position play in the first quarter. Like that's how few people were going to actually play. Which, listen, if you want to spend a little bit more time getting used to how you want to run things on offense, that's fine. What worries me though, I get it. I'm not saying Hutch and Campbell need to go out and play in the preseason necessarily, but we get to a certain point where it's like, what are we even doing? Like this, you're getting more from those scrimmages that we had, but we don't have those this year, so
And
there
that
is
was
no
supposed to
good
be
on
the
good
one.
comparison to get.
Well, yeah, and that was supposed to be the one area where it's like, okay, this is where we're going to be able to put in the valuable reps. This is where the
Yeah,
evaluation's happening. You take those away, then what do you have? Just a bunch of guys running drills against each other. That's supposed to be what we're able to evaluate how this team is picking up this new offense or how this team is adapting to year two in this defense. It kind of makes you pause a little bit and just say, you know what? See nothing, hear nothing, and plug your nose.
yeah. The highlights will be highlights. The lowlights will be lowlights. We will move on with our lives, and
You take the good, you take the bad.
it's
That's
the
us.
facts of life.
Yes. So we got into personnel a little bit a week ago. One new addition to the personnel group that came in just after we cut the show last week was Devin White. And White was a player that won a Super Bowl early in his career. He was kind of effective more so out of the gates in his career than he has been in the last few years. He started off with Tampa Bay kind of guns a-blazing, and then some injuries caught up with him in like 22, 23, really didn't do much of anything. Back this past year in 2025, he was with the Raiders for a season. He was their leading tackler quietly. I didn't even realize he was with the Raiders last
No,
year, and he was quietly their leading tackler on the team. And then the Lions picked him up for some depth heading into this preseason right here. In my mind, Phil, I'm surprised that they didn't make a move on a guy like this sooner because this is a guy that the Lions like having in their locker room. They're always looking for a guy that led their team in tackles at some point over the course of their career, or some guy that can play a multiple of positions. He can play off ball, he can go to the quarterback, he can do all this different stuff. And you're looking at these guys from Michigan, these rookies who they just drafted. They're both battling varying degrees of injury. Malcolm Rodriguez is still a little nicked up, not quite ready for showtime yet. So you bring in Devin White. Maybe you've got something that you can take into the regular season now to combat some of your depth issues.
yeah, it's a strategic move. Um, you wonder if he was the leading tackler for the Raiders last year, what led to the Raiders just saying like, "Hey, we'd rather play a young guy," or whatever. Why that didn't work out. He's still relatively young, um, but yeah, he hasn't been as effective as his first couple years in Tampa. But I think you hit the nail on the head with this one. I mean, he is someone that you're going to get in your rotation. You don't want this guy out there on special teams. I think he's too good of a player for that. But he's someone that is going to give Jack Campbell a breather. I think in some personnel sets when Derek Barnes needs a breather, he still has probably enough athleticism to play his role too. Even though I think he's a little closer to Campbell than he is Barnes. Malcolm Rodriguez, he said he's dealing with the injury. We haven't talked about it so much since free agency, but again, we don't have Alex Anzalone on this team anymore. So, we paid Jack Campbell, but he does not have the security blanket of having a guy like Anzalone with him out on the field. So, you know, if Devin White can do a fraction of what Anzalone has been able to do the last couple of years for a 1-year deal, something affordable, I think it's a stellar move by Brad.
And then if you're able to get some of these rookies back at some point early in the year, now all of a sudden that position group seems a little bit more fortified by having an adult in the room. This guy's got all pro pedigree. He's got a Super Bowl, as I said, to his credit. So all of a sudden now you're looking at something that looked like it was a possible weakness, and it looks like a little bit more of a strength because your back end is still not looking up to snuff whatsoever.
And the rookie that we drafted out of Michigan, Jimmy Rolder, he's out for kind of an unforeseen amount of time. Yeah. So again, we don't know what we have, and I feel like that move kind of set this one up a little bit too.
And not to be forgotten, Phil, the Lions did go out for some further defensive depth and picked up Amen Ogbongbemiga. I believe he was with the Chicago Bears last season.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
Of course he was.
Yeah. That's all we got to say about that.
Okay.
And cornerback Ryan Cooper has been brought in for some depth as well. So, yeah, DJ Reed's a little bit nicked up, so we're going to see Ryan Cooper and friends in the back end of that defense.
I don't know who that is, but speaking of friends, Ryan Cooper does sound like the main character of a sitcom, so why not?
I guess so. Last thing I want to get to, Phil, before you and I head our separate ways, is just a little temperature check of training camp. As we have done over these last couple of years, you've got your finger right on the pulse of the comings and goings down at Republic Drive in Allen Park. What are you seeing and what are you hearing coming out of training camp to kind of give us an idea of how things are going down there?
Yeah, so I mentioned Nick Whiteside. I think he's probably been the MVP based on some of the reporting notes that we've seen so far. I think the biggest thing that we need to be a little concerned about is just where this offensive line is coming together. Some of it is holding out some of the veterans, giving them a little bit of time to breathe. I think this is part of the NBA has the load management, so to speak, in the regular season. I think we're kind of in that part of the training camp leading into the first preseason game where, based on, what some of the reporters out there have been saying, they're kind of holding out some of the vets. They're not asking them to do as much. So the guys that are proven that are a part of this team, they don't want to get those injuries or anything. So, the issue is here, because you can't really have it either way. We started notoriously cold last year. The team looked almost unready. And a lot of that seemed to be because a lot of these guys didn't play in the preseason. Well, now we also don't have those team scrimmages. And if we're not practicing as much, and these guys aren't going to play in the preseason, they're vets and they should be able to prepare accordingly to get ready for week one. But if I'm the Saints, I'm excited. It seems like the Lions are not going to go through that hard physical element as much maybe this year. And if I was them, I would come in with a little bit of chip on their shoulder and feeling dangerous. And
if nothing else, you've got the mindset going in that you have literally nothing to lose. So that's the most dangerous attitude that you can bring into a fight or a competition like this.
Yeah.
That whole house money argument. It makes you wonder, Phil, given what you said about some of this, NFL version or variation, rather, of load management. It makes you wonder how any of these players are going to adapt to the inevitable 18-game regular season schedule that may or may not be on the horizon. If they're having a hard enough time navigating this, you add another regular season game into the mix and extending your season arguably into President's Day. What does that say about what you're going to be able to expect from getting these guys ramped up and ready, and what are you going to see from them during the season? Or are we going to start seeing guys just taking games off or something like that? I don't know.
Yeah, and you almost wonder too, like if you're gonna get to the point, not to make this a whole tangent here before we go, but like, if you got 18 weeks and you've got a game before the bye week that isn't the most challenging opponent in the world, is the team gonna sit their starting quarterback for load management purposes if they're already off to is it almost going to be like a mini bye within the season?
Especially if the playoffs are expanded, if they start accepting even more teams into the playoffs to where it's almost like the college football method. Do just good enough to get your name into that conversation, and once you're in there, then anything can happen. And I don't think that's what the fans want. I think the fans want to see 100% effort, the best guys on the field performing game in and game out. They don't want to see like a spring training split squad roster out there. They want to see the guys every game.
If you're paying $400 a ticket, you do not want to see the Lions trot out with no injury situation Josh Dobbs as the starting quarterback.
Yeah, exactly. And you and I will get to our business conversation as we typically like to do at the start of every season, Phil, because I know you've got opinions on the way the business side is taking shape with ticket prices and concession prices and all this other stuff. So we'll get to that. Last word, Phil, before we go, the Lions officially found their replacement for Rod Wood. I believe his name was Richard Haddad. Does that sound about right?
Yeah.
Yep. So he, no stranger to Detroit sports. He was formerly a front office position with the Pistons for a number of years, as I recall. I think about a decade and a half worth. So brings a good business acumen. He'll be running essentially the Lions business. He'll have some level of say-so over personnel along with Brad Holmes and whatnot, but mainly he's going to be focused on the business and building up that Lions brand and building up that paycheck, baby.
Yeah, I mean, if you watch any of the, draft videos over the years of the Lions in the war room with the current administration, and, you see Rod Wood back there, he's about as separated away from the football guys as possible. He's in the room. He can see everything that's going on, but it's truly just dollars and cents kind of position with the, Ford family or with Sheila kind of, a little bit more reserved away from all that stuff. So, he's kind of just the intermediary between, the football and the business. And, I mean, if he's got, experience with the Pistons and, he is a diehard Lions fan, was kind of in the release there. Don't know much more about him other than that. So, good luck, I guess.
From there, no news is good news. And time is up for us on this episode of Kneecaps for Breakfast. We appreciate you once again tuning in as we break down the Lions' efforts in training camp and getting them ready for NFL preseason 2026. Phil and I will be back with you 1 week from now as we take a look at what the Lions did in Cincinnati for their first preseason game. We got that coming up next week and much more. For Phil Byrne across the way, Vince Progar saying good morning. Go Lions, forward down the field.